Okay, guys, welcome back to Basics episode something. We'll figure that out. Both of us have forgotten. Uh, where I'm taking my lovely fiance Jessica and teaching her how to trade. We're in the 20s now, so if this is your first one watching, there's a playlist on both of our channels. Go back, start at one and work your way up, or it's like starting in the middle of a show. It won't make any sense, but we just finished technical analysis, then fundamental analysis. Um, Probably going to be more on technical, I'm sure. Next will be statistical, but what we're doing this week is we took a break to do a test, which Jess did okay in, and we're going to do this kind of, what are we calling it, from theory to practice, where we're just going to take about 10 minutes or so, and I'm just going to go through some charts, and I'm going to talk to you about all of the different fundamental things on that chart and roughly what I would do. And at the same time, so there's this thing in Trade Ideas. If you see me click this button up here and make a heart, what it does, it adds it to a watch list of stocks that I like. So I'm basically bringing you into work on this Saturday where I scan for stocks the next week is basically what's happening. Okay. So this particular scan that I have here, which I can give to you, is basically just ranks stocks based off their short float, which means what?
The percentage that's shorted.
Right. So the amount of people betting against the stock.
Right.
So one of the things that I like, and I think you expressed that you liked the idea of,
you like a short squeeze.
Right, is I want to know where are people putting their bets against, and where do I think, because it's a catalyst that is known, right? SKT, I know I've been watching. SKT is an outlet store. I don't know the story, again, we don't focus on that, but there is a million people betting against the stock. So I know if I can find a pattern that I know has statistical edge.
How do you know there's a million people?
That was me being dramatic. But for this, right, and this is what the purpose of this is. So this is the single stock window in Trade Ideas. And I've put one on your layout, and everyone should have one on their layout. And you can customize this with absolutely everything under the sun. So you can add any column here that you like to it. But what it is it's like a data sheet of something. So, you go and you look at a house, and there's that thing written down below that says, numbers of bedrooms, number of bathrooms, that's what this is, but for stocks. So I've got you customized kind of the way it likes, but these are the things you're going to focus on, are things like average daily volume, right? So this is how much on average over the last 5 days per day does it do. It does about 3 million shares a day if you take the last 5 days and average them out. So this is what we're going to go through. We're going to go through float. There's about 100 million shares outstanding in the stock. Of those, almost 70% of them are loaned out to people to bet against this company.
So why wouldn't you automatically take that as a trade?
Well, because what if 100 million people can't be wrong? What if they're right? What if the company sucks? So again, it's fundamental analysis is not a trading plan. A lot of people try to make it a trading plan because it makes the most sense to them intuitively.
Yeah.
But most people are usually wrong, but not always wrong. Most people have been betting that Apple is going to go up, and Apple has gone up insanely over the last 20 years. So if you had just said, well, most people think Apple's a good company, so I'm going to bet against it, you would have gotten killed, right? Same way as there was a lot of people betting against Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers when they went bankrupt. And if you had bought there, you would have lost all your money, right? So we take the technicals and we add the fundamentals, or we take the technicals and we add the fundamentals and say, okay, this is the trade I'm going to make. So here on SKT, I don't see anything right now, but I'm going to add this to my heart list because of this massive short float. And you can see I wouldn't have been interested at all as this thing is falling. But ever since then,
it's been bouncing off.
You can see, it's putting in higher lows. So I kind of would take a look at this and say, okay, well, let's just, watch this kind of congestion that's happening, right? If you just track out these highs and lows, you can see how they're coiling in.
Mm-hmm.
So I would take a look at this and say, okay, if it looks like we're going to break back over this coil, maybe that's when I would take it, right? So it's using the fundamentals to find stocks that I'm then going to apply my technicals to in order to make a trade. And you're starting to see And then what we're going to go through next is statistics and then a trading plan. And then after that, you have it all, right? So here's another one, Las Vegas Sands. Over half of the people out there, and there's 700 million shares in the float, over half of them are betting short. Now, Las Vegas Sands is a casino, so you could see why they wouldn't be doing well in this current environment. So then you take that and you say, okay, it's a big short float. Is this something I'd be interested in buying? Now, I've already drawn in the technical pattern for you on this one, so you can see it's a wedge. And generally speaking, these rising wedges resolve in the direction of the trend. So even though it has the fundamentals that may be interesting, it doesn't have the technicals. Therefore, it doesn't make the list. Again, I think it's valuable for you to see a bit of not just the stuff on the screen, but actually in real life. Now, this is one I'm going to add right away. A handful of reasons, right? So again, I do a checklist, and I've just been doing it for so long, I do it fast. But average daily volume, 2 million shares. That's a lot of shares. That's enough shares for me to take my 1,000 or 2,000 and get in and get out later.
No, that's a lot of shares. But if that float had 700 million shares, that's not a really big amount of average volume.
It is still, because you got to remember, so the reason we look at volume is just how big of a fish are you in this pond. 2 million shares, $2 stock, right? $400 million changes hands each time.
Okay.
If I'm going to go in here, maybe I'm going to buy 10 grand worth for a trade. I'm nothing, right? But if I was going to buy 10 grand worth for a trade and there was $100,000 that changed hands that day, well, I'm 10% of the entire movement, right? So we do it like this to say, I think I could get whatever price I wanted on GoGo and get out. So GoGo is this awful, awful company that charges you about $500 for internet for a 30-minute flight. But again, we don't care about the we don't care about the fundamentals. But you can see that if you were involved in this falling wedge that happened here right at support, you would have gotten a nice bounce. But what I'm looking at is I'm saying, okay, well, companies sold off dramatically. Obviously, no one's buying Wi-Fi on planes right now because no one's flying on planes right now. But it's had this little bounce and then it's pulled back, right? So here's your bull flag off the bottom, right? We talked about rounded bottoms and we talked about bull flags. I've looked at that. Again, I found it because of this. I found it because half of the world is betting against this company. So essentially we know, and this is another metric that I didn't talk about, but I'll actually explain it to you now because it involves everything else. So days to cover, right? Let's just do a bit of math, which I know you love. I promised in trading there wasn't a lot of math. There's some, but there's not a lot. But so there's 50 million shares in the float, roughly, right? Half of those people are betting against the company. So how many shares are out there bet against the company?
25 million.
Right. 25 million shares at some point of this company need to be bought. It does on average 2 million shares a day. So if every single trade was somebody buying back a short position, it would take 10 days of trading for them to clear out the 25 million shares that are short. 10 full days of trading of every single trade being covering a short position. So that's what days to cover is here, right? So
which means what to us?
So say it was the other way around. Say there was 25 million shares out, or 25 million shares out there short, but the stock did 100 million shares a day. Even though it had the same amount of float and short float, it's less impactful because the amount of liquidity that could absorb that is way higher. Okay, I'll try again. There's 25 million shares short, right? The company does 100 million shares every single day, changes hands. You see how it only takes...
That's hypothetically, right?
Yeah, hypothetically. Okay. It only takes a quarter of a day if all of the trades are buying that short to get out.
Okay.
And then they're all out.
I see, yes.
So it means the amount of move they would take would be... Now, because 10 days of action of buying shares could take place, that means that there's this powder keg of 10 days of buying in GoGo that would have to take place. And if there all of a sudden is 10 days of pure buying in GoGo that has to take place, it's a $4 stock. I've doubled my money. Right now, you're not going to get everybody exiting their shorts at the same time. It's just not going to happen. But what you're hoping is that the higher that days to cover number is, the bigger of a push that a short squeeze will give you.
Okay, so let's go back to there being 25 million out of the 100 million. So there's a quarter of it that needs to go.
No, I was saying there's 25 million shares short, and the company does 100 million shares traded a day, not their float, right? So short float is the amount in their float and the amount of shares that are lent out.
Right.
And that's it. So days to cover are the amount of shares that are short, how many shares are in the float, and then how much trading takes place on an average day.
Okay, so that's reflected in that days to cover.
Right. So basically, short float contains the 2, and then days to cover contains the 3. Just focus on short float. Doesn't matter too much, but just to build on the system. So basically what I'm trying to say is, so we know we've got this rounded bottom in GoGo that looks interesting. We have this bull flag in GoGo that looks interesting. And we know we're sitting on this 10 days of buying that's going to have to take place at some point. So I put my little heart on it, which means I'll watch it on Monday. If it starts to break out of here and it looks strong, I can buy it here. I can put a stop right here. And then if all of a sudden 10 days of buying occurs, we could get a pretty big spike. So I'm risking 20 cents to maybe make $2, and that'd be a 10 to 1. So again, this is just how we structure trades when we're thinking. So here's another interesting one. So what pattern do you see here?
A flag.
Mm-hmm. And again, there's many different kinds of flags, but right, you got basically a flag is a move up and then a consolidation, right? So this kind of looks almost more like you've got your descending triangle here, but you've got it coming out of a big move, right? So I'd keep my eyes on this. Again, I'm not interested here. It'd have to break about 15, which there's another feature that TradeIdeas has where you can click on this chart and say, if it breaks 15, let me know. And then as you're going about your day, it will make a sound and pop up and says, hey, Revolve's breaking 15. And within this, you can write up a little note and saying, I'm taking this because it's coming out of a, descending triangle, right? You can write up the whole trading plan so that when you see it, you know exactly what to do. And then again, about half of the company is short. So what's very important to note here is you notice that GoGo traded 3 million shares a day and it had a 50 million share float. This is a 15 million share float, so a much smaller company than GoGo was, but it trades almost 1 million a day still. So that means, remember we talked about that the lower the float of the company, the easier it was dollar for dollar to move the price of that company. So this is one that in theory could be very explosive, but right, look at what we see right up here, which is this prior support area. That's not straight at all, but you can see this prior support area may become resistant. So I'd take a look and I'd say, okay, well, that's kind of interesting that I could make that, but I would probably have to risk this. And that's not very sexy. Whereas in GoGo, I'm risking something like this to potentially make something like that.
Right.
That's a lot more interesting. But I'll put it on the list to keep an eye on it. So the only other things you got to keep in mind when you're looking through this, and we'll just finish with the single stock window. But again, big short float. Almost half the people are short. And you can see, remember we always talk about prior resistance, potentially future support. So we came down here, we tested it, and then we tested it, and we've got this little wedge going on here. So this is an A+ candidate for Monday right here. But again, you can see how there's just kind of in my head, I'm doing a checklist. I'm saying, okay, what's the float? What's the short? How much volume does it do? What's the days to cover? So basically everything on this list, I bring up the stock and then I do this mental checklist. And then I bring up the stock and then I do this mental checklist so that I'm making sure that whatever I'm seeing, I actually have a potential to actually trade it and make money off of it. I don't care about just spotting patterns. I want to make sure that if I'm going to take my kind of mental time and energy to focus on this and make sure it's something that I'm watching the next day, that there's enough liquidity for me to trade it and that there's enough potential to make money off it. only one human, so I can only focus on a certain amount of stocks at a time. So I want to make sure that the ones that I'm focused on have all of these. And this is what I do each night and each weekend to make sure that I'm ready for the next day.
Does my paper account have those alerts?
Yeah. Well, I can give you this exact layout with this exact scan. You can go through this as well, right? Yeah, so that's about it for what you need to see for the fundamentals. There's a lot more here. Also note that if you want to read the news, you can click on the news tab, and we went over this a little bit, but I know we're going to go over trade ideas kind of multiple times but you can read all about it here, and if you click on any of these, it will open up a web page and you can read the article. Profile, this will tell you what exactly they do. They do big data, predictive analytics, artificial intelligence, and telehealth, which is becoming a bigger and bigger thing. Insiders, this is telling you what people who work for the company are doing and their roles, right? For example, if you were on Facebook and you saw Zuckerberg sell 100 million shares, you know, like, okay, maybe you know something I don't. Again, this seems like it's about a 50-50 split. It's not really that interesting one way or the other, right? There's some people buying and there's some people selling. And then the similar tab, this is interesting as well, where you can take a look at the competitors. All of these companies here are going to be competition. And then the other thing is with price action, this is going to find stocks that are looking similar to this. So if you really like the look of this company, you can go through and you can say, right, this had the same thing with this big spike up and then pull back, right? AP, this big spike up and this pullback. So it's trying to use our predictive analytics and our AI that we have built into trade ideas to say, oh, the person likes this stock. Let me show them a handful of stocks that look similar to that. And it's still learning. It's got a ways to go, but that's how that's kind of working. Does that make sense? So do you feel like you have now both technical and fundamental knowledge that you can sit down and put on some paper trades?
Maybe
share some of those with the people.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, again, if you're seeing this on my channel, next video is over at Jess. She's starting to get to the point where she's getting comfortable enough, and she may be making some of her own videos where put on some paper trades, talk about what you've learned, about how much it hurt when you lose, because it hurts and you'll cry, and I cry frequently, but that's fine. I think I'm almost past the crying stage, maybe another 10 years and I'll stop crying, but that'll be great when you start doing those videos. And until then, we're just going to keep learning. Next will be, again, statistical analysis. So get ready for a few weeks of math. Excited?
Yeah.
It'll be great. And then we'll build you a trading plan, and then you're off to the races. All right?
All right.
Okay, guys. Bye-bye.